We made it out the storm and moved into the light. In love with life, with the sun shining bright. Doing things right, with good things in sight. Trying to stay strong and hold on with all might. I'm a hip-hop junkie, I'll never be a flunky. All I do is rock on dope beats, it's funky. Living my best life, but I know there's more to come. Used to stare at my shoes, now I'm shining in the sun. With my head held high, admiring blue skies. Had to change my outlook, cause tomorrow I could die. So I pray before bed, and I pray before I rise. Looking for the truth, so I'm not blinded by the lies. Had to cut all ties with my old way.
Good evening. Welcome to another episode of Now That We Have Recovered. My name is Joe Stevens, and today I am here with Michelle G.
Hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you for coming out and spending some time with us.
Absolutely.
So what I usually like to talk about in the beginning is a little bit about what got you to change your life. Mm-hmm. So like the last week or the last day.
Okay. I'm going to paint a picture because the last week it's kind of a blur, but I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship. Mm-hmm. I had found out very suddenly that my family had moved to Arizona without telling me. Mm-hmm. And I had just come out of jail. I had to do 6 months for identity theft. Okay. And I was given an opportunity to go to the Mather community campus, but I had to get in clean. You have to pass a drug test in order to get in. And I remember sitting in a hotel room that I had gotten, with fraudulent credit cards with needles around me and just literally sitting on the bed looking at myself and what my life had turned into and just thinking, I cannot go on like this. Yeah. Like I just can't do it. I'm a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister. This is not where I'm supposed to be. Yeah. And so I made a decision that I was going to do everything that I could to get out of homelessness and get into the Mather community campus because I knew that was probably one of the only lifelines that I was going to get. Mm-hmm. And, I white-knuckled it in the first 30 days to get into the Mather community campus. It wasn't going to any meetings or in a program or anything, but I knew that, this is a year-long place for me to lay my head at night. Yeah. This could be what I need to try something different and to actually get my life back. And so I got into the Mather community campus, and I wish that I could say that was the beginning of a happy ending for me and that I never used again. Unfortunately, I think because I didn't have that much of a support system going into it, and I was just completely broken, I relapsed as soon as I got into the program. Yeah.
What was your substance?
I used meth and heroin the most, but, I've pretty much used every drug that there is. Okay. So I get to Mather, I kind of immediately start hanging out with the wrong people and find myself using again. And, they have classes for you to go to. And I remember waking up early so I could do a shot and then go to class. And I'd just be sitting in the back row, not really taking any of it in. And, I do believe in fate and I do believe in a higher power. And, I remember walking out of my room one day and I see my neighbor and I'd noticed him before. He would play music loudly and...
Driving you nuts?
No, well, if he wasn't cute, it probably would have, drove me a little bit nuts. But I remember seeing him and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I want to go talk to him. And our paths crossed and, I think that everything happens for a reason because I was in the middle of a relapse. I met him and he was in the middle of a relapse. And I don't know if it would have ended the way that it did if we were on different, levels of our recovery. I think it happened that way for a reason. We used together a couple times, but it was the craziest thing. After, a couple days of using, I remember we were laying in bed and we were just talking and he was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to get my kid back. I want to get my life back. And from that moment, January 4th, 2019, we never used again. And I went to my first meeting and I remember that feeling. I was so broken. I couldn't even speak without my voice quivering and I was in tears. Yeah. But I knew that I was exactly where I needed to be. And it was rough. It was rough in the first 6 months. I had just come out of an abusive relationship. Now I was with this guy who was actually treating me with respect. And for a while, it was hard for me to grasp that that was something that I deserved.
Yeah.
And I think that was kind of the hardest part for me in that first, 6 months, was learning that I do have self-worth, you know what I mean? And that I deserve to be happy and to meet a nice guy. And we've been together ever since, and he's my husband. And it's crazy when I think about that. And when I tell people our story about how we met, it's definitely not the most orthodox way, but it's a relationship that I have that's full of love and support and grounded in recovery. And it's just crazy how stuff like that happens.
Yeah, and it is crazy because, they recommend that you stay a year on your own and work on yourself.
Right.
But sometimes it works.
Yeah.
And it sounds like in your case it did.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're starting to go to meetings and you're working on your self-worth and you're finding all these things out about yourself. What kind of stuff were you doing to address that?
So doing the steps was something that really helped kind of get to the root of all of that. Also, I started going to therapy. Okay. I had a lot of PTSD and stuff from the abusive relationship that I was in. So that was some stuff that I needed to work on. Yeah. So that's really, once I got in, I kind of hit the ground running and I never looked back. I really don't have relapse as a part of my story. Once I got into the program, I've really stayed clean the entire time, and I'm really lucky to be able to do that, but it's taken a lot of work. So going to meetings, meeting with my sponsor, really trying to do like a thorough 4th and 5th step. I remember when me and my sponsor met to do my steps, and I think we just sat in a parking lot for like 3 hours, and I just kind of dumped everything out. And I'll never forget that. Walking away from that, though, it sounds cliche, but I really did feel like an entire weight had been lifted off of me.
You hear that a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and it really did feel like that. I felt like I could breathe again, and it wasn't, nothing was perfect after that, but I feel like being able to kind of wipe the slate clean and learn to forgive myself and to make, to start making those amends with the people that I had wronged, it really started to help me get that self-worth back and that self-love.
It's something about writing things down and actually getting it out of your head so it's not playing, it starts playing on repeat through your head and getting it out and just fucking letting somebody hear that crap. Seriously. It's really something else.
It is.
So you said you're doing therapy too. Were you doing that once a week, twice a week?
Yeah, so it was once a week, and it was super beneficial. Just to again, same thing with working with a sponsor, just to be able to let that stuff out and to get it out of your head and to just get it out of you. Yeah, it really helped a lot. Yeah, so that was really what I did in the early months of recovery, and then I also learned. I also decided, I need to get back into the workforce, and that was another struggle. I had this big gap in my resume of, I was out there, and that's kind of embarrassing to explain to an employer, right? And a potential employer, I haven't been working for 5 years because I've been.
Putting
ripping and running.
Yeah,
exactly.
You can't put that on your resume.
You can't. But I was really fortunate I was able to get a job while I was still at the Mather campus, and me and my husband, we weren't married at the time, but we were able to, put up some funds and move out of there, and we've had a really great life ever since then. I started working at UPS in 2020, and thankfully they're a very judgment-free employer, and they really give people a second chance. And, someone like me that, was, addicted to drugs, I used to be prostitute. I mean, I used to do all these things, and now I'm a full-time partner at a Fortune 500 company. Is just it's crazy.
That's incredible.
That's what recovery really can do, though. If you really give it your all and you really put everything that you can, all that energy and that stuff that you would put into your addiction and to that whole lifestyle, if you give that all to your recovery, I mean, it's crazy what can happen. Yeah. And the doors it can open.
What were some of the early obstacles you had?
I think some of the biggest obstacles for me were just feeling like I wasn't an imposter. Do you know what I mean by that? Yeah. So feeling like I deserve to be here. I have a seat at the table, right? So when I started getting back into the workforce again, feeling like I'm not a fraud. I think that was the biggest thing for me, because when I look back at where I was 4 years ago, it's such a polar opposite to where I am now.
Yeah.
And I think that was probably the hardest thing for me to like come to terms with, was that, no, like, you've done the work, Michelle. You deserve to be here.
Yeah. A lot of people deal with that imposter syndrome and stuff like that, because you come from different lives, and then now we're good people. It's like, it doesn't feel genuine.
Exactly.
Or it doesn't feel authentic, but it really is. It's who we are now.
Yeah, it is.
So with your relationship, do you feel like that was a huge support in your life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really, and I tell my husband this all the time, I really don't think that I would be here if it wasn't for him, you know, and we made it very clear that we had to keep our recoveries at the forefront, because we're both addicts, and we have, you know, a storied past of our own. And so, you know, setting that groundwork in the beginning, being rooted in recovery, I think really helped. But then just to also have somebody that literally knows exactly what I'm going through, I mean, that's like the best support that you can really have.
No, that's awesome. And I like that you guys both like separated your recovery from each other, because I think that's important. That's one of the biggest things that people worry about with people getting together, is them only focusing on that relationship. So that's probably why it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
What's been the best part of recovery for you so far?
The best part, I think, feeling comfortable in my own skin, being the mother that I know that I am, and being able to, you know, be in her life. We were separated for, you know, we were only separated for a year, but I mean, it's torture as a parent to be away from your kids.
Yeah.
You know, we have a super blended family now, so being able to be that mom and giving them the love that they need, that's super rewarding. And I think, you know, having the career that I have and being a homeowner, you know, being homeless to a homeowner, it's just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some of the triggers and stuff that you've had crop up that you've caught during your recovery?
You know, I think it's never really the negative stuff, right? It's, for me personally, I found that the triggers for me are like when I'm at a social setting and everybody else can have a glass of wine, but I can't, right?
Yeah.
Those are those things that come up for me. That's when I'm really like, I notice myself and my addiction creeping back in, like, oh, you could probably have one, right? Trying to make that justification. Like, alcohol really wasn't ever your problem. But that's when I know, like, no, that's my addiction talking. I don't even need to open that door. So that's really the biggest trigger for me is like happy times, right? Christmas dinner, Thanksgiving, barbecues. That's when I find myself that I really have to remember where I came from and how much work I've had to put into to get where I am, that it's just not worth it.
Is that the way that you cope with it, by remembering and playing the tape through?
Yes, okay. I definitely play the tape through, and I kind of just remember that scene of myself in that hotel room with, you know, needles around me, not being able to find a vein because I had blown them all out.
Yeah.
And that feeling of just utter brokenness, that's what I remember if I ever feel tempted.
Yeah. Did drugs affect your health a lot while you were out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I especially with like oral hygiene, I'm still dealing with the I'm still dealing with the effects of that.
Okay.
So I just had oral surgery earlier in the week, and I have a whole bunch more that I have to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, you just don't really care for yourself when you're out there. You know,
I put a lot of money into my teeth when I finally got insurance that would do it. Yeah, like thousands of dollars. I was lucky enough where I kept them, but they're all have, you know, shit done to them. Every single one of them.
Yep.
Except for my front one. So what was your biggest fears when you got sober?
I think my biggest fears initially were, am I ever going to have a life again? I think in the beginning it was, am I ever going to be able to have my old life again? But what I really learned is that I never really had a life before that, because I've always felt uncomfortable in my skin. You know, that's what led me to start experimenting with drugs and alcohol and sex and all of that, is because I just didn't feel, I don't know, I just didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. And so I think in the beginning it was, how am I going to get my life back? And that was probably one of my biggest fears. But as I started going through the steps, it was, I was learning, I'm creating a new life, a brand new life that I've never had before. And so that was kind of one of the biggest fears. Also, is my family going to accept me again? You know, as I mentioned in earlier, you know, I went to my childhood home to see my parents, and there was a different family living there. I mean, I had forced my family and put them through so much shit that they packed up and moved to Arizona without even telling me.
Damn.
I mean, I never thought that I would have the relationship with them again. And I do.
Okay.
I do. You know, when I think I was a year sober, my parents flew me out. And I got to spend time with them, and I got to make amends with them. And so what I've learned in recovery is all of those fears that I have, they're not real. You know what I mean? Like, once I walk through it, I realize that it's just in my head. And everything that I could have ever wanted and then some, I've gotten back since I've been sober.
That's great.
Yeah.
How is the relationship with your family now?
It's awesome. You know, it was, I think at first, that first time that I went to visit them after getting sober, I vividly remember my mom taking her purse and locking it in her room, right? Because the last time I had seen her, I'd probably taken cash out of it or credit cards or something. And I remember that feeling, and I remember, you know, starting to kind of feel sorry for myself, like, oh, you know, this sucks, they don't trust me. And then I remembered all the shit that I put them through, and it's like, okay, well, that's probably fair.
Yeah.
And I just had to make an effort that I was going to just show them with my actions, because you can tell somebody, right? I mean, our family hears it a lot.
Yes.
We make all these huge, grand promises and then fall short a lot of the time. So I just made a vow that I was just going to show them. And I mean, they completely trust me.
Yeah.
I mean, the last time I was there, you know, earlier in the year, my mom let me drive her car, and they don't lock up their purses anymore. And I have a relationship with my sister again. And so, I mean, really, no matter how much, I don't want to say no matter how much, but for me, no matter how much damage I did, showing that I'm in recovery and that I'm living the right way was just really all that they needed, you know?
Yeah. It took a while for me, too. If you let me chime in for a second. Yeah. I know that I went home on this pass at 18 months. I had 18 months sober. I was living at this place, volunteering and becoming a counselor. And I go home on a pass, and then I go to like a late night meeting at 10 o'clock. And my mom's like blowing my phone up. I get back, and then I like lay in bed, and I'm about to sleep, and all of a sudden I hear this sniffing above me, and it's my mom sniffing for alcohol. And I'm like, but one part of me is like, what the fuck? You know? And then the other part's like, damn, dude, that's how bad it was. You know what I mean? It's crazy how that happens.
Yeah.
Do you ever miss using?
I would be lying if I said that I didn't, right? I'm human. I lived a lot of my years using. It's not even so much that I find myself missing using, it's the lifestyle, right? And I think we glorify it sometimes. When I really think about it, I don't miss it, right? I don't miss not knowing where I'm gonna lay my head at night. I don't miss not having anything to my name. I don't miss not having my kids, right?
Yeah.
But I think it's easy for us to forget about all the bad shit and just remember like the very few fun times that we did have and miss that. So that's what I find myself occasionally missing. But like I said earlier, then I play the tape through, and it's like, well, let's look at that whole picture. Okay, so maybe you had fun looking through mailboxes and, you know, trying to come up with whatever. Okay, and then you didn't know where you were going to sleep that night, right?
Yeah.
Or then maybe you had to sleep with somebody so that you did have a roof over your head, right? Like, I don't miss that shit, you know?
Yeah, playing the tape through is a gift that we get in recovery.
Absolutely.
So, another thing I like to ask people, God, is that anything that's...
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, you know, I like that in recovery you can define your own higher power, right? I grew up in a very traditional Catholic conservative upbringing, and the God that I knew then, or the God that I thought that I knew then, was a judgmental, you know, I remember going to confession, and I remember one time I told the priest something super nonchalant, and the priest was like, oh, you should be ashamed of yourself.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuck with me, that feeling like, okay, well, then God's super judgy, and, you know, and in recovery, I learned that I could create my own higher power. And yeah, I do have a relationship with God. That's what I call my higher power. And, you know, I talk daily to my higher power, and it's a higher power that's loving and forgiving and knows me and accepts me. And that's what I liked about, the different 12-step programs that there are, is that you kind of get to create your own.
Yeah.
Or, create your own definition of what God is to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think there's a difference between God and spirituality?
I do. Yeah, I do think there's a difference between God and spirituality. Yeah, I think spirituality can kind of exist without a God, right? And I think that's also what's made it easier for people to identify with a higher power, because it doesn't have to be religious. It can be spiritual and be just as fulfilling.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a great answer. What are you grateful for?
Oh, man. I'm grateful that I have a family that loves me. I have a husband that loves me more than anything. I'm grateful for my kids. I'm grateful for my job. I'm grateful for the food that I get to eat every day, the car that I get to drive, the office that I have at work. I mean, my gratitude list now is extensive. I mean, I have so much to be grateful for. And that's really what I try to remember whenever I find myself getting, negative, or I have everything and then some.
Awesome.
I have peace.
It's a great feeling, huh?
It is.
So, I know that, like, when we're out there, like, our number one thing is, like, we're trying to get more. So what are you trying to get more of now that you're sober?
Oh, that's a good question. I think trying to get more of probably climb the ladder as much as I can at work. I think now that I know that I deserve to be there just as everybody else, I really kind of want to see how high I can move up within the company.
Okay.
I'm very ambitious. So
how's your recovery doing these days?
It's awesome. It is. I'd be lying if I said I couldn't be doing more. I meet with my sponsor once a week. We're doing the steps for the 4th time. I do need to go to more meetings. I think ever since the pandemic, that kind of gave me an excuse to not be present as much. So I definitely need to get back into meetings, but I do try to make a gratitude list. I do try to, I definitely pray every day, and thank my higher power for everything. Another day sober, the life that I have today.
Yeah.
But I definitely could be going to some more meetings.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, everybody's got something that they feel like they need to work more on. So, I mean, I don't judge you for it.
Yeah.
Do you meditate?
I do. I think learning to meditate was another challenge that I had to overcome early in sobriety, because I didn't know like what it meant. Am I doing it right? Should I be feeling a certain way? And the intrusive thoughts I feel like would wait to come in until I try to find peace and meditate.
Yeah.
It's definitely a learned skill. You have to practice it and practice it and practice it until you kind of get it down and are able to kind of tune out and shut off your mind.
And it is about practice, and there's so many benefits from it. It's shown to improve memory. It's shown to improve like ADHD symptoms and stuff like that, because what you're doing is you're trying to refocus on your breath every time. So every time you do that, you're strengthening connections in your brain. So it's very important. There's a lot of benefits of it. So you were talking about making amends earlier and stuff like that. With the amends, how does it work with the amends? And then how does it work forgiving people as well, when you've had to forgive people?
Oh, man, that's it. So making amends, I think, for me, it was a big dose of humility, right? Because it's not an apology or asking for forgiveness necessarily, right? It's these are the things that I've done, right? Bringing it to the light and kind of saying it out loud. And that for me was definitely... it was challenging for sure. I think forgiveness has also been really hard for me. So the biggest person that it took the longest for me to forgive was my abuser, my ex-husband. And someone in a meeting told me this really, really great like visual thing that I could do while meditating. And she told me, she said, when you close your eyes, think about on your knees with that person in your hands and trying to lift them up, and just keep trying to lift it up, right? And it's going to be heavy at first, and for some reason that visual aid and doing it repetitively, like giving it up to God and saying, okay, like what he did was not okay, but this is only hurting me. doing that like visual aid and meditation actually helped me overcome to forgive him. And so I'm just indifferent towards it now, right? I don't accept what happened because I didn't deserve that, but I don't harbor any hate or animosity like I used to.
That's awesome. And that's with the trauma work and all the stuff that we do. I feel like a lot of it's like, okay, I'm not going to forget this happened.
Right.
But it's about not weighing me down anymore.
Exactly.
When it pops up, and then it goes away.
Exactly.
And we're able to live our life and not put drugs in our body and destroy our life over it.
Right.
We're getting close to wrap-up time. So what for the new people, is there anything you'd like to tell them?
Yeah, I would say, not everybody is the same. Maybe meetings just work for some, maybe meeting with a sponsor. For me, it took a whole slew of things. It took therapy. It took going to meetings. It took, working with other addicts, working with a sponsor. Just get over that hump. It's so hard to commit to it, but it's totally worth it if you do.
Okay. Do you have any special things you'd like to leave to women?
Yeah, I think for women that are, addicts and that are in similar situations that I might have been in, you are worthy. You are lovable. You do deserve, a better outcome. And same thing, stick with it. Yeah.
Okay. So you were talking about fear earlier.
Yeah.
What are some things that you've been afraid of in recovery?
Afraid of. I think learning to trust myself again, right? In different situations, social settings. I remember vividly, me and my husband went out with some friends to play pool, and we were like a week into recovery, and we were so awkward. We just like did not know how to be in a social setting sober. Like it was just totally like brand new. You know what I mean? And I think that was probably the biggest thing, was to learn to overcome that, and to just kind of be human again, right? I mean, that was definitely one of the fears that I had, is just, am I ever going to feel normal again? Am I ever going to be able to like have a conversation without being loaded? Yeah. Right? And it just takes practice, and and you get it all back.
It's doing things repetitively over and over and over again. Yeah, it's crazy because when a lot of people come in, we're like babies again, right? We learn how to do everything, and we're wah wah. But and with doing things over and over and over again, with each thing, happy, fear, afraid, pissed, anger, whatever, you have to learn how to go through each one of those emotions several times before you get a grip on it.
Absolutely.
So guilt, last thing. Is there things you've been guilty about in recovery, and how were you able to get over that guilt?
Yeah, so you're saving the tough one for last, huh? Okay. I mean, that was another thing that I think working the steps really helped kind of alleviate that. The biggest thing that I felt guilty about was not being a mother to my daughter for that year. And even as she reintegrated into our lives and stuff like that, I almost felt like afraid to discipline because I felt guilty. Like, oh, well, she's been through enough, right? I haven't been here for a year. And then I just learned, like, okay, well, she still deserves a mom, right? I need to learn to forgive myself. And I wish I could say there was like a one fix all. It probably took doing the steps twice fully for me to learn to forgive myself, and that guilt was just another thing weighing me down.
And a lot of people don't realize that you have to put yourself, you have to work, you have to put yourself on that list, right?
Yep, absolutely.
We resent ourselves, and we have to work through that too.
Yes.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And I hope to have you on again sometime soon.
Thanks, Joe.
Yep.